too long. So at 2:04, I will call to order the meeting of the Technical Working Group of the Santa Cruz County Airport Community Roundtable. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with State of California Executive Order N 2920, dated March 17, 2020. The members of the committee are participating via video conference with no physical meeting location, and the public has similarly been invited to do the same. We have chosen to give you all access to video and to showing yourselves with video or not at your discretion. We have, and I'll call roll here, Lydia Koo.
Here.
Glenn Hendricks.
Attendee.
Great. And Ed Budorf. I don't see him yet. So right now we will show that Ed is not present and Enander here, so we have 3 of the 4 members. I am going to ask, just doing a few procedural things, ask people to please mute yourselves unless you have been called on to speak, with the exception of the committee members. That gets rid of the background noise. And if any of you don't know how to mute and unmute yourselves, you'll soon figure it out. And if you need help from me, just let me know. Although if you're already muted, you're kind of in trouble. Let's see. I want to thank Trevor Marsden from the City of Los Altos for his technical help in getting this set up. I think you will all find that this Ring Central process works. The GUI is very much like Zoom, should be basically about the same. I also want to mention that because we have 1 or more members of this committee who also serve on the legislative committee of the Roundtable, it is important that for Brown Act purposes, we not discuss or deliberate on any other matters other than what is strictly on our agenda, and that we do not discuss specifically anything that the legislative committee may have or in front of it to work on, or anything that a member who's on both committees may know about the legislative committee other than what has occurred in public. Does any of our committee members have any questions up to this point about how the system works that I can straighten out for you technically? You all know how to find yourselves and mute and unmute yourselves?
This is Glenn. I can mute and unmute. I don't see a way for me to raise my hand, so I guess I'm just gonna speak up. Is
right.
that correct? Yep,
that's fine. If you're basically showing as being on phone only, Glenn.
It wouldn't, I don't know if I came through the right way because I'm not seeing any video or anything, so I'm fine.
Okay, yeah, we're not seeing you, and so I don't have a, yeah, just control your own.
Yeah, I didn't get a separate link or I couldn't find it, so I just dialed, I think, the same thing that everybody else has, but I don't see any videos, but it's okay, I'm good.
Okay, because if you want to go to the agenda that's online for the Roundtable, you will find a link directly in, and that would allow you to participate by video if you choose to do so.
Yeah, that's what I thought I did, but I'm okay.
All right.
This works for me.
Then I'd like to move to item 3 on the agenda. Is there anyone of the members who would like to suggest a change to the order of the agenda? Lydia or Glenn?
No.
Okay.
Wait, actually, yeah.
Go ahead, Lydia, go ahead.
Thank you. I was wondering if maybe we want to try to discuss the roles of the TWG. Oh, that's right after public comment. Never mind then. It's right after public comment. Thank you.
Okay.
And Anita, I had a quick question.
Sure, Steve.
Are we live streaming?
No, we are not.
Okay, I was thinking that Glenn could possibly see us that way.
Yeah, we are not live streaming.
But we are recording this and it will be posted on the website after the meeting concludes.
Correct. I see a member of the public who has a question. Darlene.
Yeah, just to comment about the agenda, I think the next topic is the role of the TWG. It might be beneficial to leave open the option to discuss the role both in your next item as well as after we discuss item number 6, because I think after we go through all the work items, it may raise some areas that we want clarification on the role of the TWG.
Yeah, we'll see how we go on timing. So
Yeah.
Hearing no other requests from the committee as to the agenda, we will proceed with the agenda as published. I'm going to be brave here and try to put up a PowerPoint.
Woo!
So we'll see. I am not a PowerPoint fan. I'll just tell you that right up front. And let's go to the top and go to slideshow. Can you see the slideshow?
No.
Okay, well, let's try that a different way then. And we'll go here and that. Come on, baby.
Yay, we can see it.
Yay. Okay, now if I do this as slideshow, you'll have it full screen.
Anita, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Andy. I just received a message from staff of one of the jurisdictions that is waiting to be let in.
My apologies. Just a moment, please. Go back to, sorry guys, I have to unshare screen to get out of this enough to go help somebody. So. Hi, Christine, you there? Andy, I've let Christine in.
She's probably on mute. Awesome. Thank you. Sorry
Okay.
to interrupt.
It's all right. Thank you. So let me try again. So this is from the strategic plan that says we would establish, Roundtable will establish a technical working group, and that our recommendations, if there are other technical subcommittees, come to us before they go to the Roundtable. We don't have any of those yet. So, oops. That is what our work plan says, that we're established as a standing committee. And I'm going through this mostly because since this is the first meeting of this committee and since this is being recorded, I wanted to be sure we have kind of all the basic information about the committee posted. So at the direction of the Roundtable and on exception by direction of the chair, the technical working group will thoroughly review specific procedures and vectoring, including technical aspects of the FAA's past and future actions affecting the commercial service airports, SFO, SJC, and OAK, that may result or have resulted in positive or negative impacts on member communities. The Roundtable will propose alternative solutions utilizing the consultant's expertise and promptly review and respond to changes or announcements that are time critical, including but not limited to items listed in FAA updates with anticipated implementation dates and changes posted on the IFP Gateway. The technical working group will be responsible for collecting the data required to complete its work. And our outcomes are that the technical working group will perform technical analysis on any proposals or actions referred to them with results to be provided to the Roundtable. I don't think at this point there's a reason to discuss per se the roundtable roles and responsibilities. Oops, sorry. But if there is or any questions or any comments that any members of the roundtable want to make, we can do that now, and then we'll take any comment by the public. So anybody who wants to, let me get out of here. Sorry, gang. Trying to figure out. There we go. Finally. All right. I don't see any hands raised from members of the committee.
So I do. I'm raising my hand, Anita.
Okay, I'm sorry, Glenn, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So could we talk a little bit more about what this perform analysis means and to what end? What I would really like to be able to get clarity on, let's say here we're going to pick a technical area, and which may be different than a procedure, because a procedure probably has multiple technologies or questions inside of it. If we're going to go study X, to what end? What are we trying to dig deeper into the technology of this so that we can do what? I'm just trying to understand, if I read a book or we do analysis of something, to what end are we trying to come up with, the results of that analysis would be? Does that make sense as a question?
Sure. I think the best answer for that, and I don't have the document in front of me, is the overall goal of the roundtable, which is to deal with the noise and environmental impacts and quality of life in our community. So anything that we do has to be driven toward that goal, and anything that we're assigned to do by the roundtable, or that we've been assigned by virtue of it being in the work plan, has to be toward that goal.
Okay, let me try and be more specific. Are we trying to do technical analysis so we can go argue with the FAA that something's is not the right technical solution? Or I'm just trying to go, in my role in this committee or, as a council member, I gather enough information so I can make policy level recommendations or decisions. Generally, we don't go, say, let's go have, a technical, argument back and forth on, is this right or is this wrong? So I'm just trying to go, what would be the results if, can we give a tangible example of what our analysis would result in?
I think a tangible result would be that we would go back to the roundtable with a recommendation on a letter. It might be questions. It might be a recommendation for a change in procedure. I can imagine a whole host of, again, technically oriented recommendations for the roundtable then to carry forward. I would guess most of the time to the FAA.
Would we be trying to make technical recommendations, or based on the information and analysis we did on this, we'd be making policy recommendations? I guess I'm just trying to make sure I understand.
I think, Glenn, that it could be both, either or both, and it would depend on what the task was and what the roundtable wanted us to do. For the most part, we don't meet and decide, at least this is I'm going now back to conversations and working on the strategic plan and the work plan. We don't go off and decide what we think needs to be done. The roundtable as a whole decides what needs to be done, and we're basically a technical sort of a staff / policy adjunct to the roundtable, so that the roundtable can work more efficiently, and so that those of us who have an interest in a commitment to some of the gory technical details can do some of the slogging hard work on behalf of the roundtable.
Okay.
Something else you want to say? Otherwise, Lydia'd like to say something.
No, I'm good for now.
Well, I also think that, in this technical committee, we also have Steve here, our consultant, who has a lot of technical knowledge in this field. So a lot of it, we would be seeking his advice. And this is the whole reason why we have Steve and EAS, right? So I think that would be my input.
Right. And I'm sorry, I neglected to introduce Steve at the beginning when we were going through the roll call of the committee, but we do have Steve Alverson and Evan Wasserman, both from ESA, who are consultants and technical advisors to the Roundtable and also then to this committee. So if there's nothing more from my committee, I see Jennifer L. has something she'd like to say. Jennifer, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I understand what you've just discussed is what the technical committee will be working on. And I would like to stress the importance of how technical recommendations are going to be made. And especially because in the 5 years of working on this, the missing piece has been actual information about noise. And so there's always a lot of talk about, left-hand turns and right-hand turns and lines everywhere. But there isn't enough information about noise, because our biggest issue is that the type of noise that we're experiencing on the ground is not really reflected in a lot of the information that gets to the FAA or to the roundtables. So I think that unless the technical committee is going to be about noise, data, and analysis, I think we're just repeating a lot of the problems that we've had in the past. And so, I think it's, that's got to be clear, because the one thing I want to avoid is to present an idea that citizens are being served when we're not really being listened to or represented by the table, and we're just kind of being reactive to whatever is happening, and we're not getting the information analyzed that we need analyzed. And that's my comment.
Thank you. I see Robert Holbrook. Robert, do you want to unmute yourself?
Thank you. A couple points. First, I think Mayor Hendricks's question was a good one. And my thought on that would be that while we would like to address the FAA at sort of the highest policy level that we can, we have to be effective. And I think we all recognize at this point that the FAA sometimes has a way of forcing us into engaging on issues at a level that is very specific. And in fact, when bodies such as the Select Committee attempted to address issues at that level of specificity, stuff has come back at us in a way that's not really what we were after. And I take the case of Pirate as an example of a procedure where we got into specifics kind of because we were forced to go there, and it didn't work out ideally. So I think there's a real tension here. I think it's important that we have a body that has the capability as much as possible to actually get in and work with the FAA at this level that they are forcing us to work with them at, and to address questions such as the one thing they said they were willing to consider in the ad hoc committee report, which was to alter the prescription around altitude at Hitir. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but that's a quite technical question. It seems like something that's properly, if the technical working group isn't going to address it, I don't know who would. That's my first point. The second point, which is different, is that strictly speaking, the technical working group derives its authority to, well, let me say it has broader authority where the technical working group is explicitly listed as having a role in the work plan. There are 6 items in the work plan that are designated as to be determined as to whether the legislative group or the technical working group should weigh in on it, and or both. And it might be a topic of interest to discuss if any of those items should are ones that this group feels they should be engaged in, and if so, make a recommendation to the roundtable as a whole to change that designation in the work plan from TBD to yes, the Ledge Committee should be, or excuse me, the technical working group should be tackling that one.
Thank you, Robert. And the other Jennifer. And can I ask you to also lower your hands when you finish speaking? I do not have the capability of doing that.
Got it. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. A couple of things, again, regarding the specificity on what is to be worked on, technical specificity. Oftentimes it's, as Glenn was kind of mentioning, do we do policy or do we get into specifics? And at some point, I was a liaison, for example, between technical and business side. And often what the technical side would say is, tell us what you want, not how to do it. And so I want to kind of mention that we're not necessarily the experts here other than Steve. And so we need to be a little bit careful here. We could probably be able to interact, but ultimately some of the what we want has to be done by the FAA. We can make recommendations and such, but again, they're the main experts along with Steve, for example. And so I don't want to get too much into the specifics since we're not the experts. The other thing is when we get time critical issues like coming through the IFP gateway, how will that work if there's not a roundtable meeting for us to discuss those? What would be the general procedure if they're not in the work plan, kind of unexpected, and they come through the IFP gateway? What is the process there? And will the FAA ever be involved in these meetings? In other words, if they get somewhat technical or if there is an IFP gateway issue, will the FAA be involved? Because I know for the SFO roundtable, occasionally the FAA is involved in the working group meetings. And so I wonder if in that same sort of process, if that will occur here in some of the meetings as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Marie Jo, I think you wanted to speak.
Thank you. I don't have a hand, so that's why I had to raise.
That's what I thought.
I think what Jennifer Landsman said about the noise impact, yes, it has to be, that's key to understanding what the FAA is doing, and they've been avoiding this and have been giving us, plenty of changes, and usually they completely avoid to really talk about the noise impact. But I do hope, so that's critical, but I do hope that this technical working group will challenge the FAA because, yes, we may not be the aeronautics experts, and the FAA is, the agency on record. However, in the last 5 years, we have had countless examples of false information from the FAA. And I will just pick on one, which is the night hush departure procedure from SFO, which is now under evaluation. It's not done. The FAA for 3 years came back and said, infeasible, infeasible, infeasible. It took everything from the roundtable at SFO, including Kathleen Wentworth and Jackie Spear, to get the FAA to back down. So if this is not an example on how a technical working group can challenge the FAA, I don't have any better example. So we need this group, this is my request, is this group needs to get into the technical details, and it depends on the issue. It could be a procedure, but it can be something else. And there are many topics under that can qualify as technical. But the thing is, I view your role as a way to challenge. If you're not going to challenge the FAA, then we can just back up and go. There's nothing to do. We know they've hurt us. They continue to hurt us. So we need help. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Darlene.
Yeah, I want to reinforce Robert's comment. There are some things in the work plan that are not assigned, or they might be in one group or the other, but sometimes there needs to be work done on the topic before it gets considered for legislation. Not all the things, but some of the things. So we probably should look at that. And the second thing is the huge value of the technical working group at San Francisco is that if you look back at the agenda for the SCSC roundtable, there's usually only 10, 15, and at most 20 minutes on a topic. And that is not sufficient for the FAA to present on a major procedure for such a short period of time. So the advantage of this smaller group is that you can actually spend more time discussing the topic. I've been incredibly frustrated at the bigger roundtable when the FA presents for 10 minutes and then we say, oh, that's the end of the agenda item, we need to move on. And to me, they're the main topic of why we're having a discussion around noise.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands indicated, so I think we can come up to back to discussing or possibly putting on a future agenda item some of the points. But as you know, I can't react to we can't really react to public comment directly right now. I think a lot of this will get clarified as we move into the next subject, which is the discussion of items that are actually assigned in the work plan to us. And I have divided those up.
So
by,
Anita,
I'm sorry.
Anita?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Glenn. I actually would like to have an opportunity, I think, to, to react to some of the things we just heard right there. I mean, I think this is kind of what I was trying to get to. And I'll bring in another new element is, how many things do we think we're going to be able to go ahead and do? I heard members of the public say, how is the technical committee going to react to, something that comes up, just from the FAA? I don't know how many different things this technical working group is going to be able to work on, but certainly, is there an expectation that if, there's some new thing goes on the gateway, that we'll be able to respond and jump right on it? I don't know that we're structured to be able to do that if for no other reason from a budgetary reason. And then I also heard words like, we need to challenge the FAA. Is that really our objective and goal, that we think we're going to go ahead and be the ones who are going to get down, technically understand something enough to challenge the FAA on a technical level? I mean, that's why I was trying to ask before, would we understand, get enough information so we might go back and challenge the FAA at a procedural level or a policy level of what's going on? That's where I'm still a little bit unclear, especially hearing, I thought I understood based on your answer, but now hearing what some of the public has thought are expectations. Or do you think you've got answers to all that stuff?
I think that Lydia and I probably have answers to something like the gateway question. And we've got somebody who's got background noise. If you can mute yourself, that would be helpful. With respect to the gateway or things that might pop up or letters that might show up from the FAA in between our meetings, especially as it turns out our meetings we may have a longer interval between our meetings. That I'm pretty clear, I'm pretty confident that the way the charter of the committee was set up is that if something pops up in the middle, then the chair is, well, either one of two things. One is if it's something that's already in our wheelhouse, that we can meet and deal with it. I'm not going to say I can cover every single, 100% of exactly how we would proceed on every single example, because I can't anticipate every single example. But if it's within our already defined scope of work, we could meet and work on it. If it's something that's not in our scope of work currently, then the chair of the roundtable is tasked with assigning to us and being able to say, hey, this popped. We need an answer within 30 days. The roundtable's not meeting. We're going to assign, I, the chair of the roundtable, am assigning the technical working group to look at this and do whatever it is that she tasks us to do. So I think that covers a lot of the technical matters in terms of stuff that's already in our work plan or that would pop up on the gateway, or that stuff that might, come from the FAA in between meetings. Does that at least cover that one for you, Glenn?
Well, I understand what you said. Forgetting new things that came up, how many different technical things, i.e., how many meetings do you think this group is going to have between now and the end of the year? If I kind of thought we were going to go here, maybe there's 10 technical things we could work on. We prioritize these top 2 or 3, and that's what we were going to work on between now and the end of the year. Not that it was going to be an unlimited set of topics that we would deal with, or
well, I think
just
that's
not
why
understanding it at all.
Yeah, that's why we have item 5 on our agenda, is to go through the things that we have reason to anticipate there might be some action needed between now and the end of the year, and say on a realistic basis, what do we think are the most important, the most urgent, and what can we do, or what other ways are there to deal with those particular issues. So that's a big piece of what number 5 is about.
Okay, well then I might reserve more comments until we get to 5.
Okay, Lydia, did you want to say something?
Well, I was going to, but then you covered most of it. I think that, it's very difficult to determine whether it's policy or procedural, tackling those. But like what Robert Holbrook had said, for example, when Pirate came up, most of everybody had to kind of jump up and look at it really carefully and look at what FAA had done and interpret it. So I think that, yes, we need to be kind of nimble on this committee, but at the same time, take into consideration, that there is budget issues, funding issues, time issue, and so forth. And I think, what you said, you covered it, but then also going into item number 5 is where we can take a look at more of it and see where we go with that. Thanks.
Okay. So then I'm going to go ahead and move to item 5. And go back there. So I split agenda item 5 into 2 pieces. The first is everything that was in section 1 of the work plan, and then the stuff that's in sections 2 and 3 of the work plan. So with respect to section 1, which is all the technical stuff, and this I think was conveyed in the agenda as well, is that we should make sure we at least have a uniform understanding of what the current status of that item is. Try and estimate what's likely to happen next and when that might happen, if we can in any way guess at that, and then develop a consensus on the importance and urgency and perhaps a likely working order or level of effort or who or whatever is needed to get us through the rest of this calendar year. And then the items that I pulled out are Surfer, Bodega, the General Ad Hoc Advisory Committee recommendations on South Flow, San Jose South Flow arrival procedures, header, which was been mentioned a minute ago, Pirate, which has also been mentioned. 1.3.2 really is agenda item 6, so I want to separate that one off, and we'll take that one up separately. 20.5, non-conforming departures from San Jose, and the SFO and Oakland departures, which is also a piece of what's going to be an item in agenda item 6, but it may or may not cover everything, so I left it in here. Is there anything that either Glenn or Lydia you think I have left off from section 1 of the work plan? These are things that all, just to be clear, these are things that all mentioned specifically in the roles and responsibilities that would be, the technical working group would have a piece about. What I want to do is get agreement on that this is the list. Then I want to try and go through just the factual information on where we are with these, and then hold to have comments from the public once we are sure where we are with these and what we think is going to happen next. And then I'll take public comment, and then we can come back and discuss the kind of the priorities and assignments. So that's the flow I'd like to do. So Lydia, you want to go first? Did I forget anything?
No, I think you have everything on here. There's one that I was wondering, do we keep track of any of the FAA response to the select committee? If they respond to anything of what select committee have said, FAA, do we want to track those? I think that might be something that we want to make sure that we do as they come up with more procedures and so forth. Just a consideration to put onto the paper,
right,
and then discuss it a little bit further.
Right. Glenn?
So yeah, I think this is all the items. I'm not sure I understand why item 6 has already been separated off separately, because it's for discussion. And this is what one of the things what Lee just talked about is I'm concerned about. You've got this defined list, and we seem to want to add a bucket that says, well, and we'll keep taking stuff on, because I'm not sure, actually I am sure, we can't do all of these things that are on this list between now and the end of the year anyway. And so I would like to make sure we actually build a fence about what it is that we're going to be worried about or not worried about. But I'm okay with going through what you're saying about the status of these if you want.
Okay, this is where I'm now going to ask for Evan's help, because as the three of us talk, I want to be sure we capture our understanding of where we are with each of these things and what's liable to happen next, or what we might want to have happen next. And so I'm going to just start with the first one. And I don't want to exclude Steve here, but I think I want to go Lydia, Glenn, and then anything else that Steve wants to add, and kind of do that through all of these, if that's okay.
Anita, may I just, the matter that I mentioned about tracking FAA responses to the select committee,
Yep.
I think on the work plan, that was 1.1.1.
Yeah, and I think that we aren't listed there for some reason in the roles and responsibilities. And if we are, then I missed it, and that's my oops. And
If we could add it to this list and then look into it a little bit afterwards, that would be great.
Right.
Yeah. And then are we going to discuss the urgency or the status and comments on it before it goes to public, or how is this working?
What I was going to do was have the assessment of status and likely next steps, and then public input, and then at the end we would discuss what we think we want to tackle and what we want to feed back to the roundtable in terms of priorities. Okay.
Okay.
So which of you guys wants to tackle Surfer and Big Sur?
I can.
Okay, go.
So on Surfer is 1.1.2. Surfer is back to Big Sur. So I would say the urgency would be high.
I'm sorry. What I'm wanting to, and maybe I wasn't clear, so I'll do this again. I'm wanting to identify what we understand the status of this to be.
Oh, I see.
What's happened? Where are we in whatever the process might be to getting to where, as a roundtable, we want to get with this particular technical issue?
Okay. Status and where we want to be. Okay, the status. So basically on Surfer, we're still waiting for FAA. So the question, we're still waiting for FAA to come back to tell us, what they're about to do. And I was just thinking, have we sent a letter? Has Maryland sent, I'm not sorry, not Maryland, has the roundtable sent a letter already? I think this was brought up in the last SCSC roundtable meeting, but we're still unsure. And if the letter has not been sent, so then would the chair of the TWG develop the letter with the chair of the SCSC roundtable in order to, or have you develop it and have the SCSC roundtable chair approve it and sending it out soon?
And the purpose of that letter is to get the FAA to move, or
is to ask to have them present to the because their procedure is still under development.
Right.
So we want them to have a request to come and present what they have, what they're formulating, and then present it within the next 2 months or so. I mean, I think that time is of the essence of this also.
Glenn, is that your understanding and also what you would like to see happen?
I don't consider myself the expert on saying what's happening next with this one. I'd be interested to hear what Steve has to say.
Yep, that's where I was going next. Steve, do you have any insights into what the status of this is?
I do, Anita, in committee. On Lydia's point, in terms of writing a letter, since late last year, we have collectively the roundtable and those of us who've been working behind the scenes have asked the FAA to come to the roundtable and do a presentation on where they are. We did so sort of informally with an email in December. When they were at our January meeting, that request was made in public, asking them to report on it. You might recall we were told that they would like to be back in February, which would be when the quarterly report on the select committee activity had been completed. February, we were busy, I think, with wrapping up the strategic plan or the work plan at that point in time. They didn't report, and then lo and behold, we went into COVID shutdown. We have reminded the FAA over and over again that the committee, the roundtable is very interested in this item. They want to report out. We keep getting emails from the community saying, we want to know what's going on. So the FAA is well aware of this, and certainly it wouldn't hurt to write a letter, but they know that this is sort of item number one that we want to hear from them on this.
Okay.
And we know what they told us back in July. They met, they did some preliminary design, there was some work being done. We don't know what steps have taken place since then.
Okay. Anything else either of you want to say before we capture status on the next one?
Well, I just feel like to a certain degree, we can't quite just leave it at that. So I would like to kind of have some ideas. So this is not where we're going to discuss on how to resolve this, right? To get
Right.
FAA to a table to present, to do a presentation, since what Steve has reminded us is that it's kind of in their ballpark now when to come back. Do we want to send a reminder letter? Hey, you still owe us this, or is this not the time, Chair?
I'm flexible about doing this. I don't mean to overly structure and constrain this, but there are a lot of things to get through. So if there's a consensus, the next thing ought to be that we ought to send a formal letter, and we can agree that that ought to be the next action. Then I'll make note of that before we go on.
Anita, my suggestion would be, Glenn, this is Glenn. Anita, my suggestion would be is to write a letter to our congressional representatives and have them write a letter to the FAA and say, how come they haven't responded to us yet?
And to that, I thank you so much, Glenn, for that suggestion. And to that, I want to also say that Favi had written a letter to Karen Chapman, and if I understand the letter correctly, there was indication from the congressional office that said that there is the congressional aide that said that there was no constituent interest. So is that wrong or right, Steve?
I believe, Lydia, there's a high level of constituent interest.
Okay.
Very high level.
Okay. So if there is that letter that has that indication that there is no constituent interest, then we definitely want to correct that and remind that there is a humongous constituent interest. So if that could be an action item to number one, verify, clarify, and then follow up.
Right. What I don't want to do is I don't want us to come to a final decision on what we want to do until we've had public input.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
So that's
Thank
what
you.
I'm kind of trying to walk this fine line here on
you.
that. Okay.
Okay.
So I'll
Yes.
take that as your recommendation and further input. Thanks, Lydia. Bodega.
Bodega would be me too.
That's why you signed up to be on the committee, right?
Oh, yes. So Bodega, as you know, there's East and the West Bodega, right? And one of my, the status on this is, with the low traffic right now because of COVID, the planes are the planes are still using the West Bodega when they could be also trying to use more of the East Bodega. So, East Bodega flies over the water. So why can't there be more change to help the whole peninsula at this point, right? But also, we've heard that Bodega West is kind of conflicting with the diamond arrivals. But if there's some airlines that come through Bodega West at 5:30, why can't we use the East Bodega at that point?
Steve, do you have any insight here?
I have the same understanding that Lydia does. The FAA said they were going to attempt to use the East Bodega more when traffic permitted. It would seem like this is the perfect time to do that. Traffic levels are exceedingly low, and one would imagine if you're going to improve the performance on East Bodega, this would be the time for the FAA to concentrate on it and do that.
Do we have a document from the FAA that says that, or is that from just conversations?
I believe that it's their responses in the response to select committee report. I might be wrong on that, but certainly I know that one of their goals was to try to even it out, and that was obviously the select committee goal as well.
Okay.
So Anita, this is Glenn.
Yes, Glenn.
It sounds like, what we want, what would be good would be for the FAA to give us or re-give us what is their actual implementation plan. What are the set of tasks that they plan on doing? They're going to run a test or a run, and their criteria for how they go from step 3 to step 4 to step 5. So, not get, a verbal, hoochie goo doesn't work. Tell them could they please just put something in writing of what it is they're actually doing from an implementation perspective on this item.
Okay. I have a note that Andy wants to say something, so I've got to drop out of where we were. And Andy, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
I just want you to check your waiting room again. I think we lost a participant and a participant's back in.
Thank you. I got her back. We'll get through it, guys. Thank you, Andy.
Anita, may I continue on something?
Yes, please.
Attending the San Francisco Roundtable, they're working on Bodega West and East as well, right? So this might be a good opportunity to work in concert with the San Francisco Roundtable, the Technical Working Group, to put in a request to work together on this.
Okay, I'll take that on the list. Glenn, do you have any more comments before we move on?
Not right now.
Okay. Ad hoc advisory committee recommendations on South Flow. And maybe we kind of sort of take the next two together.
Yeah, I'd be happy to make a comment on this.
Please.
The ad hoc committee made a recommendation. The FAA simplistically poo-pooed on the idea. And I believe, I've stated over and over again, we should use the expertise of Steve and his team. There is a clearly identifiable way where we could at least create 2 rails into South Flow and create some form of dispersion. And I believe that should be the number one thing this technical group does, is send Steve and his team off on that direction to go do that.
Okay. Lydia, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think this is what Glenn suggested is good, and also that this is exactly the point where we do want to challenge, where it falls into the challenging what FAA had poo-pooed about, and we go back with our technical consultant coming up with some suggestions and solutions to challenge their poo-poo.
Okay. Is there something different in 122 regarding South Flow arrivals that we want to take up or that we think we're assigned to do?
I'd have to go back and look. If we assign Steve, were to assign Steve to go off and, you know, work on the procedure for 1.2.1, I would just also include them, ask them to see if there's anything that makes sense to be wrapped in from 1.2.2.
Okay. Lydia, you concur?
Yeah, and I would like to invite, if you might invite Steve to comment on
Yeah,
this.
well, I'll do that.
Okay, I just kind of wanted to know if we're directing him to go off on the right direction.
Well, let me be real clear. First of all, we can't direct him.
Okay.
We're not, I don't think we have the scope, at least at this time. We don't have the scope to do that. Our recommendations are what we think ought to happen with these, what the priorities are, and so on, so on. All needs to go back to at least to the chair and then to the roundtable. But I'm sure Steve has an opinion as to whether he would like us to make that kind of recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Yes, this is the type of work that we do. We could do that analysis if charged by the roundtable to do it. And I think along the lines of challenging the FAA or providing an alternative to the FAA, it would give them the opportunity to see perhaps a different way of looking at this and to see what the noise exposure and noise impacts would be. So it's right up our alley. If that were something that were given to us, we could definitely do the technical analysis and bring it back to this committee.
Okay. All right, then let's take 1.2.3 hitter. Steve, you want to start with this one? I think you probably got the best knowledge.
Sure. So the idea was hitter is a waypoint going into San Jose. The idea was to get aircraft higher over hitter, and there were 2 or 3 alternatives that talked about how to handle this. And I think in each case, the FAA said they couldn't do it in terms of the wide angle and other issues that technically that they were dealing with. So it's one that, again, I think might be worth re-exploring to see ways in which if we were able to change the angle of descent, put in an optimized profile descent, and to see how that affects the noise and bring that back to the committee, that might be a good way to take a look at it. But it was another one of those items that the FAA dismissed on the basis of, I believe, airspace issues.
Right. Glenn, comment? Because the way this stands right now is just the let's see, Anita, say this kindly. The response from the FAA is not something that the committee and the roundtable probably want to accept as presented.
No, I agree. It took me a second to get off mute
That's
here.
okay.
I would think, again, going back to what I said, take 1.2.1, 1.22, 1.23, all have to do with that kind of south flow stuff. If we were to send that off to Steve and his group to look at, that would just another piece there. I would just want to be careful that we wouldn't want to put, too many things in one procedure where the FAA could, stop everything. So having that group look at them, and it might be, 1 or 2 or 3 different recommendations that go to the FAA to review. That they might be something that could be reviewed as a package, but maybe more dealt with on an a la carte type menu solution, if that makes sense.
Okay. Lydia, you okay with that?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to tee you up for Pirate. I know how much you love this.
Right. So FAA sent a letter in May, and my comments on the status is that they sent a letter to us in May. Now the comments I have is that FAA misused community supports. community asked for A and then the FAA delivered a B, right? Then the FAA says that the community supports B. And I don't know if I need to go through the entire of what happened, what transpired between after select committee recommendations to when this whole thing was implemented, right? If you do need that, let me know. But I think most of us know what the problem is here,
Yeah.
right? And then it's this. So when they did the B, the B procedure or alternative, they moved noise, and it was without support from the communities. There was no opportunity even to review B before it was implemented, right? And it has the same thing. It also misused airport, saying that airport supported it, but where it didn't. Airport, I don't think even had anything to do with it, but ultimately they misused that support. And then secondly, FAA also had an assumption that the KDEX proves what the KDEX proves is drastically incorrect, and there is no recourse for it. So saying the increase of use, saying there's no increase of use, it's a private procedure. But when the procedure is put in place, other other airlines or aircrafts, or they're going to find out about it, they're going to use. So essentially, the traffic on that procedure on pirate use was 35% increase. There was a 35% increase on that pirate use. And so, this whole discussion about pirate has been really concerning, because a lot of it was done in not in good faith. And, we talk, they nod, but, then they come back with something different. So I'm just saying that, they're either not listening carefully or just not serious, or they're just indisingenuous in their replies about pirate. So, I would like to get more complete answers. Well, I think the community would love to have more complete answers from them in terms of their definition, in the definitions for Pirate 1 and Pirate 2. So I think that's mostly what my concerns and my comments would be about this.
So you'd like to basically do a rejoinder to the May letter?
Yeah, I would like for the technical committee to kind of review the FAA letter, then come up with some response to that letter, and perhaps even like what Glenn had said previously, copy the congressionals, so that they know exactly what is happening.
Okay.
And, to kind of loop back to what happened at select committee and the recommendations, how along the way it kind of zigzagged to something different.
Glenn, comments?
Yeah, this is one, what Lydia just said is a little vague to me. I mean, this is an example of where if we're going to go through that exercise, to do what? Is this already a done deal, or do we think we're going to go ahead and try and get information or provide information or gotcha the FAA so that they do some different kind of action? I understand what is being asked for, but when we get all of that information, what would our expectation be of what we would do with that? Or is it, well, we don't know because we don't know what they would tell us? Or, this just seems one of these things that the tennis ball has gone around. And if we go through the exercise, and this is where we spend our time and energy, because I don't think we can do all of these things, what would we think is our plan of action to use with the information?
Let me try this. The procedure was not, so FAA's mantra has always not to shift noise to other communities. With this, they have actually gone back on their word or their mission, not shifting noise to other communities. While they may have raised the altitude for certain communities. They actually have caused it to come into, shifted to Palo Alto and to East Palo Alto. So I think that, they need to revisit mostly what was asked of them, and and it was also on their part to clarify, is this indeed what Select Committee wanted, and what the ramifications, unintended consequences could be when this happens. So, I think on this here, I'd love to also hear from Steve, once we receive a reply, what can we do? But also, I'd love to hear from Steve, because there is misleading, in a way I feel kind of cheated, that they could have, FAA could have told us what the unintended consequences would have been if they went ahead with this.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. One aspect of this that we all will remember is the FAA's analysis in preparing their CADX looked at the procedure from out over the ocean to where it terminated at ARG, the new waypoint. And then it didn't look beyond there. And our sense is the changes happened all beyond that waypoint. And the FAA's point was, well, everything after ARG is going to be the same as it was before. That does not appear to be the case based on what we're hearing from the community and the concerns that we're hearing. One approach that I might take to this is to do a before and after. What before this was implemented? What does it look like after in terms of flight tracks? And then you can also do a noise analysis as well and see how it changed noise exposure over that area. Then that would give you something to bring back to the FAA and say, your assumption that nothing would change after ARG is correct.
Sorry, I was on a call.
Can you please put it back?
Thank you.
It was before?
Okay, I'll talk to you. I haven't checked your messages or emails yet. All right, I'll check later. Thanks.
Did you hear that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Got a little, somebody needs to mute themselves.
Yes, so the point is, FAA's previous analysis on this said the procedure will terminate at ARG, and therefore anything that happens after that will be exactly the same. We all believe, based on what we've heard from the community and members on the committee, that's not the case. That operations got worse, operations were increased, noise exposure increased and was shifted. And so the analysis that I would do, looking at it from a technical standpoint, is what did the flight tracks look like before? How were they concentrated before this change was made? What does it look like after? Do in fact we see a shift in the flight tracks? And then also analyze it from a noise standpoint. Are we seeing the noise shift? Are we seeing the noise increase? If we're seeing that, that gives you information to bring back to the FAA and to say, your assumption that things weren't going to change did not happen. Conditions changed, noise got worse, help fix it. But, either put it back to the way it was before or find a way in which to deal with this problem that you, the FAA, created.
Now that seems to be a lot more productive than trying to go back and rebut what they put in the May letter on such things as, where they said they could realistically expect that the usage of the procedure would not go up. And then when I read that, my reaction was, well, you are crazy. But I don't think there's anything productive to be gained by going back and saying, we think your answer to the May letter reflects that you were, crazy.
And just one last point also, when you're developing a procedure, you don't develop it to the middle and not all the way to the final destination. And this is what they did. They developed it to the way to ARG, and they say we done our job, But what about the rest of it? There's still a final destination that it needs to go to. So
yes.
Not to address the final destination, there's something wrong with that. Then it means that leaves a whole bunch of us kind of in the wind.
Yeah, I don't want to try and identify the problem and solve it here if we have some consensus on what the next steps should be.
Okay.
Sounds like we kind of do.
This is Glenn. Those next steps sound very good. They also sound very expensive.
Well, that's part of why what we were going to do is recommend things back to the roundtable, and where they're going to have to discuss, and other folks will have to discuss financial impacts as well. So we'll come back to that. Denny, this is another one I think maybe we're starting with Steve is a good idea, because maybe this is another one of those where we now look at the impact, wait a period, look at the impact, and then react. I don't know. What do you think, Steve?
Sure. And you'll recall this is a nighttime departure procedure out of Oakland, designed to replicate the current, what we refer to as a conventional procedure. There was no published procedure before. They would give aircraft vectors. They would take off, make turns, and fly down the middle of the bay. And at some point, most of those aircraft would turn off to the southeast and go to their destination over a fairly wide swath, and generally out in the area of Fremont in the East Bay towns. The idea of this procedure was to standardize it so that the pilots can look at it, put it into their flight management system, and fly the procedure essentially without direction. It's not an RNAV procedure, so it's not basically channeling aircraft on a rail. It's still a conventional procedure and would be subject to variability. The concern about this that I heard when we discussed the roundtable is that the way it was drawn was that the procedure could potentially have aircraft go to the sunny waypoint, which is at the south end of the bay. And if that were to happen, that could shift traffic over the Santa Clara County communities and potentially create impact, particularly since it's a nighttime procedure. It was published at the end of January. It's currently in use. However, COVID happened and operations dropped. So we had asked Bert at SFO if during the meeting when this was discussed, if he could track this for us. He said he could, and then later got back and had discussions with his management staff. They said, well, maybe it would be better for the Oakland Noise Office to track this. He put in a request for the Oakland Noise Office to do that. Then COVID hit, and really nothing has moved forward since that time. The good news is both the San Francisco and Oakland noise monitoring systems collect this data, so it's always there for us to go back and take a look at. But it will probably be a while before operations ramp up and we have a real sense of what's happening with this procedure. And I think that brings us kind of up to date on where it is.
Okay, then I'm going to go out on a limb and say this sounds like one where probably holding for now, because we're not going to have enough data to be useful for a while, is probably the thing to do, and then to go some point in the future, grab the data, see what impact we're having, and decide on a future course of action.
Sounds like it to me.
Okay. Loop 5. I'll go back to Steve on this one for the same reason.
Yeah, and Loop 5 was, this is a departure procedure out of San Jose, as the name implies, although it's a different kind of loop. In terms of the word here, the aircraft depart to the south, make a loop to the southwest, go back either up over the airport and head south, or find a particular point and head north. The issue was it was not clear. Aircraft were deviating from this procedure, and the idea was to clear this procedure up. It's been in place for some time now, and pre-COVID, so I don't know if there's been any complaints about it or any concerns about it. We certainly haven't revisited it since we initially discussed it a while ago, other than passing that it should be something that we track.
Okay. 1-3, Lydia or Glenn, do either of you want to comment on Loop 5?
Not right now.
No, I don't have anything either. So thank you, Steve, for that.
You bet.
Okay. 1-3-5, non-conforming departures from San Jose. What's the status? Which of you want, Glenn, you want to take that one?
I'd rather hear what Steve has to say.
Okay. Steve, you're elected.
Yeah, and I haven't revisited this in particular item in a while, so I would need to look at what the issue is there. But based on the name, presuming that it's departures that are not following the typical runway use or the runway use in place at the time. The idea was to try to identify those non-conforming departures. I think there was maybe a Japan Airlines flight, and to try to work with both the FAA and the airlines to see if we can eliminate or significantly minimize those departures through basically an awareness process. But again, it's not anything that I've heard about. I believe that the Japan Airlines flight went away for a while, and it may have come back, and certainly with international flights significantly cut back, it may not have been an issue for the past several months during COVID.
So, Glenn, Lydia, what's your idea here?
Oh, I don't have any, but I just wanted to ask Steve, or, maybe later on the general public might be able to help with this too. Who does this flight, this procedure impact? Because, it's out of San Jose, and it'd be interesting to hear who it impacts.
Okay.
Thank you.
So this is Glenn. Yeah, I'd be interested. To me, this is going to be a prioritization question, and this would be, it's still something we want to follow up and work on, but this is in my opinion, subject to hearing something from the public, might be if we're having to prioritize things, this might go a little bit lower.
Okay. All right. Do you want to talk about 1-3-6, or do you want to roll that into the conversation in agenda item 6 when we talk about SFO? And Steve, you know enough to probably be the person to tell me whether it makes more sense to talk about this now or talk about it as part of agenda item 6.
I think we should talk a little bit about it now, in that this was an item that Carlos brought up. The idea was, rather than having San Francisco and Oakland departures go over the populated areas of Santa Cruz and the Santa Cruz Mountains, that if you were to move them to one of the waypoints that's out over the ocean, that it would basically get them off of the populated areas. So that was Carlos's idea at the time, and again, it's something that this committee could explore, and certainly it would be of interest to the Santa Cruz County and the city of Santa Cruz, as well as the community members there.
Right.
How do you say those waypoints? For foil? Foil?
Foil and Young.
Okay. I was going to pronounce the F's as well. For foil and young.
Yeah, Foil and Young.
Okay.
Lydia, Glenn, any comments?
Not at this time.
Yeah.
Let's take public comment. I'm going to go off of this screen so that I can go manage people. I can figure out how I did that again. Oops. So, I don't want to do that. Okay, I'm going to go in order that they're appearing on my screen. So Mark, and then Robert, and then I have a phone number, and when I call the phone number, I'm going to ask you if you would be so kind as to identify yourself members of the public who speak are not required to identify themselves, but you're welcome to do so when I call you. So let's start with Mark, please. And Mark, can you unmute yourself, or do you want me to unmute you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so just a couple of comments. In terms of the first one, the surfer to BSR transition, we've pretty much been able to follow that via FOIA because we've been able to get a hold of the PBN full working group minutes. There's a couple of things that I think people should be aware of. Up until 2018, the full working group, that's the technical folks at the FAA, have found it undoable. They found it unflyable. That got changed in 2019, and they are working on it. But just be aware that it is dramatically different than what the Big Sur track was. It's kind of higher, has some of the, keep the planes high until Eddie problems that we ran into with Surfer 3, which is why you hear those air brakes, over Los Altos and such. And they're moving it. They will be moving Eddie according to the current plan. It's not clear to me why the FAA has not made this available, but I suspect a lot of it has to do with the fact that it really doesn't look much like what I think people are expecting. On Pirate, very similar thing. If you go back with the, the SFO Roundtable has wanted 8,000 feet at the Woodside VOR for years. The FAA has resisted that for years, saying it's going to shift the track. And in fact, when they rolled it out, it did shift the track from generally a 040 heading off the VOR to a 060, which actually is in the actual chart. And what you can see, and I can send you, maps of it, just how great a rail that has created from the VOR down to about El Camino and Page Mill. It is an absolute rail, as tight as Surfer. On top of that, obviously, they added Oakland. And the other thing is, if you listen to FAA, basically the instruction is, once they pass the VOR, because they already have a track, they don't need a heading, they stay on what they have, the 060, it is descend and maintain 4,000, which is a very noisy type of procedure. So it's just been more, it's a real problem. So these are the things I think, a lot of this information is available. I know that was part of the discussion you guys had. And I think a lot of us can provide it with the documents. And then the question is, okay, what do we do about it? And how does it get escalated? And a lot of these things are being escalated by congressional representatives. It's just that ours aren't that involved in it right now, and we really need to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Robert Holbrook, I will unmute you. You are unmuted, Robert. Oops. Come on. There we go. Thank you. Yes, we can hear you.
I don't have anything to add on Surfer. I would add for Bodega that I think this one is kind of urgent because traffic is down so much. So there really isn't a reason. The FAA can't fall back on the reason that, well, we can't do this because of congestion right now. So if it doesn't happen, it's because they can't get it done or they don't want to get it done. To Glenn's point, asking what's the implementation plan, I think it might be more productive to ask the FAA to set an objective during this period. How many flights, what percentage of flights are you targeting getting cut over to Bodega East until traffic gets higher? And the implementation plan will fall out of that if the objective is right. Third, the ad hoc recommendations on South Flow. Glenn's suggestion of going just to 2 rails is kind of controversial. It's not something that we explicitly discussed or was approved by the ad hoc committee. And I think we may need to get a broader consensus of the roundtable as a whole before proceeding too far down that path. What I would like to see, though, and this will require some work and Steve's expertise, is crawling through the 60 line items that were in the appendix that the FAA received and replied to, and seeing if we can ask follow-on questions that nail the responses down a little bit further. I would really expect to see that. A lot of work went into that 60 recommendation list, and we shouldn't just abandon it because it's a chunk of work. As to HITIR, I'd like to correct a couple things that were said. This is one of the two things that the FAA said they would consider. The objective was not to raise the altitude of the airplanes. The objective was to allow the airplanes to descend at a descent gradient most natural to them so that it could minimize the use of noisy surfaces. So the next action would be to get input, hopefully from ESA, on whether this change would likely reduce noise on the ground after considering surfaces, not just altitude. And that's a tougher question. As to Pirate, Pirate is a poster child for the FAA to consider in drafting the congressionally mandated Section 572 response for the FAA Reauthorization Act, which is due in October, which is to describe how well the FAA is engaging the community. This is an example where the community did everything right down the line, from the very beginning to the end. And if this didn't work, it's because it basically couldn't. There was no way the community could have done a better job than we did on this one. So I think we ought to bring this to the attention of the people that are drafting that report as a challenge, sort of as the exception that proves the rule, as to whether or not whatever they're proposing is going to be adequate. That's something that this committee could do, or it may choose to refer that to the legislative committee, but I think the roundtable should do it. SUNY, Loop 5, and the non-conforming procedures, I think those are all low priority at this point. The non-conforming departure is one flight, it's ANA 171. I do believe it's a safety issue. It might be able to be dispatched with a letter to ATC or maybe SJC expressing our concern, but it doesn't merit a lot of time. And then lastly, the FOIL to Jung transition. I sent a document yesterday that shows the transitions of airplanes past the port waypoint. And this may not have been the intent of this item, but it does show that there is one leg which goes from YouTube to Intel that crosses Silicon Valley and the communities of Los Altos, Palo Alto Hills, Los Altos Hills, Los Altos, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, and San Jose in our jurisdiction. I think it would be good for us to understand the impact of that on us, that leg, while not taking away from the suggestion that I got clarification from Steve on, from Carlos, which was to try and encourage more airplanes to use that Jung to FOIL transition, because it does look like that carries airplanes all the way down the coast for a long ways without touching land. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Let's see, the phone number that ends in 7342.
Thank you. That's me, Jennifer Landisman. I'm somehow
Okay, hi, Jennifer.
I'm at the meeting via video and phone. So on this item, I have heard a lot of concern about what is going to be important, urgent, how to prioritize, what's the amount of time and energy that the committee will have, building a fence, things like what's doable, and so forth. So to me, this goes right back to the issue of what is impact. And to me, that is an issue of quantifying the problem and assessing what the noise impacts are, the severity of impacts. And I would say that at the very minimum, the communities must have an objective basis for your decision, and that it's not going to be a political issue, but rather you are going to address it with a lot of data and analysis. And if that takes however long it takes, we need to do that. The next question is, what is the environmental documentation for any and all of these procedures? Because there is a moment, and the amount of time you have to respond relates to the type of structure that the FAA has set up. So with an environmental review, we have a pre-planning stage. We don't have that with a CADX. And so unless the roundtable was going to take a position on objecting to catexes and letting know the FAA that we need a whole lot more time on everything, I think then you are going to be chasing and responding and never really serving and not doing the real fundamental policy work that needs to be done on this issue. So, and this goes to the point made by Mary Jo about pushing back. I mean, really, the issue is that if we're constantly responding, then we're having to push back, so to speak. But I think communities that have been involved in this, trying to do everything as well as possible, such as happened with Pirate, and I believe that a tremendous amount of energy was spent on the select committee as well. And I'm glad you pointed out, Council Member Hu, that 1.1, one of the top things is to respond to the select committee. So, you know, if we need to know if this committee and if this roundtable is going to take up the work that has been on the table for several years. We're not talking months or weeks, we're talking years. And we have to know that impacts are being looked at on an objective basis. And we do have to know if you are going to politically address these issues of pushing back and what the basis for that is. It will be a fiasco if the way this is going to work is what the FAA is willing to look at, what they can look at now, what's the lower hanging fruit, and so forth. We've been through that too many times already. And so I think that if you're going to use the consultant, I think especially because of ESA's expertise on all sorts of, you know, work with airports, I believe the fundamental question to get from the airports and from the FAA is what is the stack of environmental documents that we have a basis on? Because catexes are not supposed to happen just out of the blue. You should have a basis for which to do a catex on.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And thanks.
And I have Jennifer T.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Couple of notes as I was listening to everyone. Some of these items seem to be a lot of work for this committee, and some would be minimal work for this committee. So things that might seem like they might be a lot of work might be minimal work to get these going again. For example, the Surfer Back to Big Sur might simply be a letter or contact to the various congressmen, basically saying, we want the FAA to give us a clear timeline, a general plan for completion, and to reiterate this is a very high public concern to the public. Minimal work, but basically with maximum impact potentially. So something like that I would high priority. Again, I think Glenn's idea of getting it through the Congress members, our local Congress, is important. Bodega East, again, something that I think is kind of low-hanging fruit, as Robert had mentioned, the fact that they're not doing this despite the low amount of traffic that we have is concerning. So we need, like Glenn said, we need an FAA implementation plan for this. What is their plan to start moving the planes to the east? And yeah, we understand that Diamond is a problem, but for night flights and under this COVID situation, this should be happening. And so a clear letter, again, minimal work, but maximum impact, asking them exactly what their implementation plan is and what their timeline is. Regarding the ad hoc committee recommendations, something that is really important because it's SJC. Steve working on that to try to figure what can be done, going through the 60 items on that and trying to go and look and see what can be done, what can't be done. That's a lot of work, but it is important. So it's a high priority, but that's going to be a lot of effort. But again, something that I think is high priority. I want to caution on the HITIR waypoint idea, because I remember in the ad hoc committee, Fan from the FAA warned a number of times that when you simply raise a waypoint, you can have consequences at the bottom of that, of the flight path, basically. So while that may help the people in Cupertino and South Sunnyvale, it could be a horrible, potentially, for the people in North Sunnyvale. So again, caution, kind of like what happened with the Pirate Waypoint, where they simply raised it and made consequences down line. We want to make sure if we're asking for that, we know what we're asking for. Sunny 1, that Oakland departure procedure, while it seems like it would be a low priority, I'm a little bit alarmed by it because, again, it sets precedents for Oakland departures potentially. There's a reason they're doing it. And I realize that we've got low volume because of COVID, but I don't want to lose track of this one because once you've set up a flight path, it has precedence. And then the FAA can go down 10 years later and say, oh, the planes were there. We're not here any longer, having the meetings, or we've moved on. And suddenly we've got a major flight path there. So I don't want to miss that one. As far as Loop 5, I think that's a low priority. And then I wanted to go to the SJC non-conforming departures. Again, I think it's kind of low-hanging fruit, something that we can do quickly. That's procedural. What's happening is those departures from SJC.
Can you wind up, please, Jennifer?
Yeah. Sorry about that. One of the departures is going back and around, sometimes going over Palo Alto, sometimes going over Sunnyvale. It's a dangerous procedure when they're doing that. They're coming close to arrivals. And so I think something can be written on that regarding the fact that that's dangerous and shouldn't be allowed. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. I don't think I have any other comments. Oh, I'm sorry. Darlene, Mary Jo. Darlene will take you first and then Mary Jo.
Thank you. Regarding the Big Sur overlay, there should be zero ambiguity that the citizens, that the Roundtable, and the congressional people want the presentations as soon as possible. If you look at the previous agenda packet, there seems to be confusion. So a letter needs to go out. The full working group was last June, and I guarantee you there is a lot of information on that procedure because they reviewed it so they could say they support it. We have to avoid another pirate, which is we ask for A and they deliver B. So that's really key. The bodega, there has been presentations by the FAA on bodega with them explaining why they can't do it. But now that the volume is down, we need to address why they're not doing it. So I believe there needs to be a letter. I think that there should be a presentation to the 2 roundtables because it's the entire peninsula. And then the FAA can do a Q&A and reply to questions. That is really what needs to happen. So that's bodega. Number 3, the south flow. I think we have to be very strategic about the use of Steve's time. I don't have the answer. I need to reflect more. But I think that, given all the recommendations, the question is which ones could make the most difference that we could make progress on. And I think that's possibly where we can get his consultation and then proceeding on a few of those. Pirate is significant because one of the issues that's come up throughout the roundtable is the problem with the FAA's process. And it's very hard to generically say there's a problem with the process. Pirate actually can cite exactly what's wrong with the process. So I think that there needs to be a higher level letter about what's wrong with the process, and it may end up being a recommendation through the full roundtable to give the action to the legislative committee in terms of future legislation. But the second thing is that we also need to be able to raise the issues about the entire process not being addressed, et cetera. I think the before and after is good. I guess the question is, can there be a lightweight approach to that, depending on what's involved. But pirate is an example of asking for A and getting B. This isn't just pirate. This is something that's going to affect all of us in any recommendation we make, and they do. SUNY, I think one of the issues that Jennifer brought up is that there's a process flaw. If one airport or ATC, whoever, makes a proposal and clogs up the bay, that removes solutions for anybody else. And we're not part of that process. So we need to figure out how to address that problem in the future. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Jo.
Thank you. So I think there are two aspects to this, to attacking this problem. Yes, we want to find solutions to all these done deals that the FAA has made. And that's why you need to drill down into each procedure to understand the impact, number one. But also, and importantly, when you drill into these details, this is how you're exposing all the flaws, as Darlene said, into the process that the FAA follows, be it at the design level, at the environmental review, in the communication, etc. So the fact that, for instance, on Pirate, we have a CADEX where their assumptions are blatantly wrong. I mean, I'm not talking a little wrong, I'm talking blatantly wrong. That they can get away with that, that's something that needs to be exposed and that needs to be fixed. 35% increase in volume is not a small difference in the assumption. Saying that an airport supported that procedure when they did not, that's not a little difference in an assumption. So by learning, by going through these procedures, not only we need to find solutions, but we also need to use this example to highlight all the fixes we need to do. The fact that the FAA in the Bay Area, especially on our peninsula, has strategically decided to end the procedures far away from the final approach because they can get away by not doing any environmental review and impact analysis. Everything is vectored. Great way to justify that there is no impact. They will never find any significant impact. So these are the type of issues that we need to address. In terms of trying to jump to solutions and doing more analysis, I will caution this group. It can be very time consuming, it can be very expensive. And the problem is as soon as you come up with a solution, the FAA is going to say, no, safety-wise, it's not possible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure, we need to think very carefully about proposing alternatives, but in terms of priority, the surfer request to go back to the Big Sur ground track was a select committee recommendation. We still do not have an official presentation from the FAA. Remember, we just got the stuff from a FOIA request. This is unacceptable. And what they have proposed, what we know from the FOIA, is not what was requested. So here's another parrot. And we need to stop that because we need relief. And I'll speak for Palo Alto right now, in the neighboring city near Palo Alto. We get Parrot, we get Surfer, we get Bodega West, and we get San Jose South Flow when it happens. Parrot occurs at night. Surfer arrives at night, also late arrivals. Bodega West, early morning. So we need to expose that, but we need some solutions, but I wouldn't say analyze more data. I wouldn't go there. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Mary Jo. All right, I want to bring it back to the committee and ask us to try in the next few minutes to come to a summary of suggested actions on these to take back to the roundtable, as well as de facto scoping out what we want to tackle. And I feel like maybe Glenn is the first person who ought to go on this. You okay with that, Glenn?
I'm okay, but I was wondering if you could put your list back on the screen.
I absolutely will. Thank you. Just a minute, please. As soon as I remember how to do this, share, and there, and there. And I think it's that one. Got it?
Yeah. So I'll try and answer your question. I think it'll be a little bit different. I don't know that we need to say exactly what we want to do with each one of these things, or maybe we can. But to me, the first one is to prioritize the list and then go, here, this is the order with which we would deal with this. And that we would like the roundtable to give us authority to work on this order of what goes on, and this much money from the roundtable, so we could, you know, that would let us decide how many meetings or whatever we could do. And then if the amount of money and that prioritization said we worked on X, and then we worked on Z, and then we worked on L, and we ran out of money and we couldn't work on the rest, that's what it is I think we should go ahead and define. It's just what's the sequence and order I think we should go ahead and do things. And I would put 1.2.1, 1.2.2.
Well, you're gonna have to go slower than that so that I can write them down.
The first, the three that were related specifically to Southflow: 1.2.1, 1.2.2, 1.2.3. I would sub-bullet those together and say that's priority number one that we want to work on.
Okay, keep going.
I would defer to Lydia for the next stage. So if I win and get that as number one, let somebody else pick number two.
Well, you may have to contest with Lydia for number one. Lydia, do you want to comment?
Well, that's fine.
You know, I kind of, thank you, Glenn. I really liked what Jennifer T had to say. You know, there are some things that are, that takes a little work and has huge impacts, and then there are the others, right? So, so for me, are we going just first priority, or can I name more?
You can go more than that.
Okay, so my first priority would be surfer. My second priority would be pirate response. My third would be Southflow, and it would be the combination of 1.2.1, 1.2.2, and 1.2.3. Then my number fourth one would be Bodega. And then my number five one is not on your list, but I think it could help with a lot of different cities. San Francisco is implementing or about to implement GBAS, and that might have some relief for many cities. And then the number six is FAA procedures development and environmental review process input. So I'll name the six for now, unless you want me to go through the entire thing. I can do that too.
Nope, that's fine. I think the challenge for me is that both Surfer and Southflow matter a lot to the community. They affect different communities. So for me, I think it's really tough to choose one over the other. They're both big issues. Pirate, and I like the idea of putting the three Southflow together. Pirate, to me, we need to look at using it as an example. I like the comments about what Marie Jo said about using these examples, and perhaps, and someone else made the comment, and pardon me, I didn't note names on all of these comments, feeding some of the example from Pirate 2 into the 572 response, which is something that might get recommended off to elsewhere. It might not be something that we directly end up doing. But that's kind of where I am, is Southflow and Surfer, using Pirate as an example until we can get more information, a little more information that we can then go back to the FAA about it. And then Bodega and a couple of other kind of low-hanging fruit letters that were talked about. So I think if we can agree to make two top priorities, I think we pretty much have a consensus on what to do. Does that make sense to you guys?
Anita?
Yeah.
Anita, this is Glenn. I
Yeah.
kind of like where you're going. I think I've been relatively consistent in other meetings of going, we need to be focused. And I don't believe we can do much between now and the end of this year. I don't think we're going to be able to really get into and do the kind of things we want to do on more than two of these things. And so, you know, number one and number two, it doesn't matter to me which sequence they are. I'm assuming we could work on 2. After that, it's a whole different story. But I would like to also say that when we get into, the meetings to start doing this stuff, we need to stay, if we are able to work on 1 and 2, that we stay focused on 1 and 2, whatever they are, until we get significantly done with either one of those, and we don't let ourselves get pulled off to something else, because otherwise we won't accomplish anything.
Agreed. But I also am hoping that if there are a couple of things that would have impact with writing a pretty straightforward letter, that we ought to do those. In the old days, we used to call, when we were prioritizing things, as A, B's, and C's. C's could be lower priority, but then there were those that were really easy to do. So it was called a CZ, and we just went ahead and did them. So
Anita, if we wanted to put item number 3, then ability to write letters to support, noise impacts, and that if an individual letter is not going to take more than X amount of time, then that's number 3. I'm cool with that, but I'm just afraid people are going to take, this thing should just be we can just write a letter, and then we're going to spend all day talking about it. And it won't actually be as simple as what somebody thinks.
So it sounds to me like what we would be going back and saying to the roundtable is that we really need to find a way to compel the FAA to tell us what's going on with Surfer. And we would like to figure out how to allocate some funds and scope a review and response on Southflow that encompasses those 3 elements. And that those are really the big 2.
Yeah, a response meaning a recommendation that goes as procedure changes to the FAA.
Right.
Yet to be determined what they are. And I just want to go ahead and say one other thing. I want to make sure everybody in the public remembers, even if we make a recommendation to somebody, and even if the FAA goes and looks at that procedure, that has to go through all the normal procedure stuff, which the FAA cannot describe to us, before it actually becomes. So it's not just because we say we want to do something doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's got to go through the process.
Well, we've certainly learned that. Okay, so are we pretty much agreed?
May I ask a question, Anita?
Sure, Steve.
So it would seem to me if item number 1 is to compel the FAA to report out on Surfer, that doesn't seem like it's a big lift, at least until you hear from them and then you have something to respond to. Does that sound about right? And then if that's right, then it would seem as though you could pull in one more item that could also be one of the priorities.
Well, I think we're going to end up with one more item when we get to agenda item 6.
Okay.
And then I'd like to be able to circle back with the group, because if what comes up in item 6 doesn't end up making the cut, then we could come back and pick something else. Because I agree with you, Steve, that we could go one more.
So I'm confused. I wasn't writing down everything of what you said, but in the list of what you went through, Anita, didn't you have the items on this list as what was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7?
I did not. Lydia did.
Oh, okay. Well, somebody did, and
yeah, Lydia did.
I'm okay. I'm okay with whatever the rest of that was after where we had 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And to me, how I think this should work is not that it's. I'm assuming we can work on 1 and 2. Once we get significantly into 1 and 2, to where we think it now makes sense to open up another can, we would go to whatever was number 3 or whatever was number 4. That we're defining the sequence, 1 through N. And as we get to where we have time, resources, ability, whatever, that we think we can open up another swim lane, we will. And that we've already defined what that discussion is. So is that different than what you were just saying?
No, that's no different. I think there might be a little bit of subtlety down in the weeds about this, and that is if we tackle something and it involves sending something off to the FAA or asking the FAA to do something, and for whatever reason, nothing's going to happen for the next 3 months, then I think we ought to open the next lane.
Right, but we would make that decision at that point.
Right. So I just wanted to get a concurrence down in the weeds with you on that one. That it's not that something has to get, quote, finished, because we all know kind of what the timeframes are.
Yeah. Things we're at a point that makes sense to do that.
Right.
I just wouldn't want to say, let's open up 7 at once.
Right. All right. We have 35 minutes until we're supposed to be finished. So I want to just really quickly hit what's in sections, and I'm going to go back, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here.
Anita, while you're doing that, can I ask Glenn a quick question?
Sure.
So by the end of the year, Glenn, do you mean by the end of the calendar year or by the end of the fiscal year, which will be the Roundtable's budget through June 30th, 2021?
I was meaning by the end of this calendar year.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it also.
Okay.
So the items that are in sections 2 and 3 are a little bit more wobbly, I'll put it that way, maybe. And Lydia did put one of these on her list. But I guess the question is there anything here that we want to, because these aren't really super procedure specific. Is there anything here that we think ought to make the main list?
Well, I just have GPAS.
Yeah, Lydia, you had also put what was basically 2.3, recommending changes to the procedure development and environmental review process.
That's 1.1.1, right? Oh.
No, that's 2.3, but you mentioned it in your list.
Right.
Which is why I asked about it.
Yes.
Glenn, is there anything here that merits getting onto the list at this point?
So I would love to be able to put 2.3, I'm a process guy, on the list, but that would take all of our time, and there's nothing that the FAA says that they care anything about what we have to say about what their procedures are. So I don't, as much as I think that's actually probably one of the most critical things that could be done, if it could actually be done, I don't think it fits in what we're trying to do. And the congressional staff actively participating, that is, I believe that should be done, but that should be done from the main roundtable. That doesn't need to be done by this subcommittee.
Okay. Ready for me to move on then? Sigh, I heard that sigh.
So would there be anything here that would address night hush?
That'll come, I think, when we get to number 6.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. We're still on number 5. Okay.
So before I close out number 5, I think I have one community person, and I should let you speak because I popped some other detail up here. So Robert, go ahead. Robert? I'm having trouble unmuting you, so not sure
Sorry
what's
about that. I apologize.
all right.
Done that. There are 2 items that were in section 2 that were explicitly assigned to the technical working group. One is time-based flow management, and the other is the FAA procedure development and environmental review process.
Right.
As I mentioned earlier, the section 572 report is an opportunity to address item 2.3. I think it's our best opportunity. I think it's the best opportunity of the community throughout the United States to address that process because it's a mandated report by Congress due in October. As to time-based flow management, it's low on urgency, but it is very important because it will double the number of flights between Eddy and Side-by. And I think it's important that Congress understand the implications of that before it gets rolled out. That may be another one where a letter asking for the status update would be a relatively low-hanging fruit that we could do and check the box on that.
Okay, I'm going to take two more comments here. Jennifer T.
I've lost the screen. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can get back to it. Bear with me a moment. Okay, there it is. A couple things. Can you hear me?
Yes.
On 2.3, the understand and recommend changes to FAA procedures. Well, I think that's extremely important. I think that should be legislative committee doing that work. I don't think it should be necessarily the technical working group. Also on time-based flow management, I think also that probably should be legislative. Again, that's just kind of my thought here, but I just thought I'd mention that. I think it belongs to a different subgroup. Thank you.
Thank you. And now the other Jennifer.
Thank you. So as you look at procedures in the technical committee, the reason that 2.3 and process matters is because let's say you pick up any of the procedures and you make a recommendation. That will either have a CADEX, as Mr. Hendricks said, it goes through the natural process. It'll either have a CADEX or an EA. And you will have had to inform communities about potential impact. And all of this, everything we've been talking about centers on the fact that according to FAA, there is no impact unless it's a 1.5 change of a 65 DNL. And we are in the conversation of that we need alternative metrics. The FAA recommends alternative metrics in order to consider specific situations. So to me, the most important thing about the reason I bring up impact and I bring up process in terms of noise is because we do have to look at noise and not in the traditional way that it's been looked at before. And the reason that matters is that the recommendations are going to happen, but then you're going to have potential challenges, whether it's a lawsuit for a CADEX and so forth. And so helping the FAA make the processes better is really important because then everybody's going sort of on the same page and we're not like sort of fighting in the end. Oh, you didn't explain that this was going to be the impact over here. And, you know, we're going to be faced with a process like what's happening in Orlando where the FAA shows very clearly all the really, really sharp lines. And then they say, oh, the noise is going to go up a little bit and down a little bit, and they're using DNL. So could we just kind of get away from the fact that this is all a big joke unless we do things with some noise information? And the processes have to conform because it's not just going to happen that you say, oh, we make this recommendation, but in the process of the recommendation, all of these things should already be taken into account. So that's why I would recommend to be aware of all the processes first. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move to item number 6. And let's see, go back here, go back there, go back there. And there's something I want to read in addition to what's on the screen here. This is what I got from the chair of the roundtable. Just got from the chair of the roundtable, who's been in touch with San Francisco. San Francisco actually reached out to her. The SFO roundtable is engaged in discussions with the FAA relative to previous requests to the FAA for changes in routes during sensitive nighttime hours. The FAA will be presenting their recommendation to the San Francisco roundtable technical working group meeting tentatively scheduled for late July. Once there is an understanding from the FAA what they are recommending relative to the nighttime use of this departure route and the impact on our respective constituents, there will likely be an opportunity for the San Francisco and Santa Clara, Santa Cruz roundtables to collaborate in responding to the proposed changes and recommendations. So far, kind of what we have is potential collaboration over with San Francisco and Oakland regarding night flights with overlapping routes, which would cover West La Four, would cover the departures that we've been just talking about with Foyle and Young, would West La Four, which affects Santa Cruz, Stick 4, which affects Santa Cruz, and Candle 4, which also affects Santa Cruz as well. So nighttime flight recommendations that are found in the FAA initiative to address noise concerns of Santa Cruz, Santa Clara, San Mateo, San Francisco counties update on phase 2, which is dated November 2017, is kind of the origin of all of this. Specifically, Night Hush and the East and West Bodega may possibly be included in these collaborative discussions. This is the first time since the Select Committee on South Bay Arrivals adjourned that these routes have been reviewed. The San Francisco Roundtable has written a formal letter asking numerous questions of the FAA and requesting they look at options, including such items as altitudes and departure times, that would lessen the impacts on residents under those flight routes. It's my understanding that letter is scheduled to go out this week. I double-checked, it has not gone out yet. My hope is that once San Francisco Roundtable has agendized this topic, our technical working group would be prepared to join the discussions. And since collaboration with the larger Bay Area Metroplex has been a priority of our roundtable, I look forward to, this is Mary Lynn speaking, the technical working group sitting at the table. As a result, I'm requesting with concurrence from the vice chair of the San Francisco Roundtable, Ann Wengert, that this item be ranked as a priority for the upcoming fiscal year 2021. So that's what I got from Mary Lynn. And so I think what I'll do is take public comment first, and I'm going to ask you guys to please limit yourselves to like a minute, minute and a half, just quick comments so that we have time to discuss what and how we're going to do this. If we're going to do this. So I see, I'm going to go from the bottom. Robert, Mr. Holbrook.
Can't hear you, Robert.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I think leverage is always a good thing to pursue, and this might be an excellent opportunity to pursue this Bodega East item, which I've mentioned. Again, I think it's urgent because it's important to chase this one down while traffic volumes are low and the standard excuses don't apply. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer T. I'll unmute you next.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm hoping that I can see, or we can see that letter. I was a little confused by some of the contents of that letter. Was it a replacement of Westlaw and Candle for Night Hush? Is that what the proposal was?
No. I don't believe that that's a proposal. It's what she was saying is that the whole topic of taking the question up is covered in our work plan, where we discuss the F-foil and Young transitions with respect to West La Four, Stick 4, and Candle 4. So she was just pointing out where this is, where the relevant parts of this are in our work plan.
Oh, referring to it. And then this is to discuss about Night Hush then, correct?
And potentially involves Night Hush. I don't know that we really know yet until we see the letter what the full scope is that they want to tackle.
Okay, yeah, because I've looked at the night procedure and there are a few concerns about it, and that's, maybe I shouldn't bring that up yet, but those were just a few concerns on what they were proposing.
Okay, so Glenn, Lydia, do we want to say yes?
Wait, I don't think you can see us.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're off. My apologies. Darlene, go ahead.
I think the most important thing is we should find out how whatever they're proposing might affect cities that are on the roundtable. It's very hard to comment until Steve shares with us what the procedure is and how it impacts us.
Mm-hmm.
Darling, Marie Jo, go ahead. Oops. You're gonna have to.
I will echo what, I will echo what Darlene just said. I don't know. I know quite a bit of stuff on these things. I can't make a judgment based on just a letter without knowing the potential impact. So it goes back to priorities. You have limited bandwidth, and even this coordination with the San Francisco Roundtable will be limited. The question is, what's the biggest bang for the buck? And impact is really important. So you may not know the full impact, but at least you have to guess the potential impact to make sure that we're working on the right stuff. And by the way, because we missed a comment on the previous section, I do hope that this committee is going to provide input on the procedure development environmental review process to the legislative committee. Because yes, it can be fixed in legislation, but if you guys in the TWG do not provide input, how are they going to do it? So it doesn't have to be big. We have many examples. By the way, we can give you the examples. We don't have to reanalyze everything and start all over again. We have been at it for 5 years, you guys. 5 years, many people who have spent 10,000s of hours. Let's leverage this.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you.
Okay, Mark's got his hand up also. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mark.
Just a quick comment on the night hush. I should check this, but the night departure is an Oakland departure that goes north. The hush is to merge the San Francisco departures, go north in the same track, and then a transition out through the Golden Gate Bridge. That may not affect us. So I think what concerns us more, and we may want to add this to it, are the 050 departures, where they're going to take off on the 10s and turn right, go down the bay, and perhaps climb out over us at night. So I think that's the one I think we've just got to make sure we don't just narrow it to the night hush. It's the opposite, they're not fully opposite, they're 050 departures, which may be coming down the bay at night over us, which would not only be departures over us, but it would force more of the arrivals to be over us as well. So that's what we should keep our eye out, I think.
Right. Steve, do you have any particular insight into what's actually going to go in that letter?
Unmute. Gotta find that unmute button. I don't. I haven't seen it, don't have a sense of what might be it.
Okay.
I'll strive to get my hands on it.
Lydia, Glenn, do you feel like you can take an action here, or what do you want to do?
So this is Glenn. I'll go ahead and go. There's actually multiple things in this. And one is I'm trying to take into account, we've been trying to establish relationships with the other roundtables. And so if that's important to try and get a more, Bay Area wide piece, I think that plays in what I'm about to say. I have some concerns about what a governance model would look like and what does it mean for us to collaborate with them. Do we get to attend their meeting as just like a member of the public, or do we actually get some kind of voting rights in what goes on? I have concerns about what is, our success criteria objectives might be different than the San Francisco group's success criterias. But if this is a part of the process where they're trying to come up with some ideas, now is the time to be engaged and at the table, to be, part of those discussions, as opposed to we could say, let's not participate, and then we'll have to argue with them about what comes out later. So I would say it makes sense to at least let's start the process of trying to see what it would mean to collaborate with them. Does that make sense what I said?
Absolutely. Lydia?
Yeah, I was listening to you read the letter, and it's really hard to understand, how we're going to support if, what some of the members of the public said, if we don't even know the impact's going to be. So, and like what Glenn said, I agree that it's time to engage, be part of the conversation.
Okay, then it sounds like, because I agree with with what you've both said. It sounds like the thing to do is to say, yes, we feel that it's important to engage. We don't know what that looks like. We're concerned that we would need to know what our success criteria is, and that there's some chance that we can have a beneficial outcome, as well as making sure that we actually have a meaningful participation role, and that we're not just, you know, a member of the public.
So Anita, so I like everything you said. I just want to for you to consider our success rate. I think airplane noise is, as oftentimes have been said, there's no boundaries. It's all up and down the Bay Area, affects many different communities in many of the same ways. But the whole point is that, we have limited resources and limited budget, whereas, San Francisco Roundtable is a little bit differently funded. So I think that's where I would ask for the consideration to use that verbiage or include that language.
Which language?
That, we have limited resources,
So, Lydia, I agree that's totally true. I don't think we need to put that in the letter. I don't think we should go ahead and say, we want to join your group and we're, a limited resource entity.
Well,
let's join, figure out and see what goes on. If it comes time to dividing up work and other things, once we get farther into it, that might be an appropriate time to bring up that discussion. I just don't think it needs to be in the letter now.
Okay, well, then I think I was trying to supplement our success rate. I think we want everybody to be successful in getting out of airplane noise, getting away from airplane noise. So it's not only about our success, it's also their success, is what I was trying to
Great. Yep,
say.
I've captured that concept.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Okay.
I think that brings number 6 to a close.
Hi.
Next would
Hi, I
be,
had a comment.
I
for that
thought I
speaker-
thought you'd already commented. My mistake. The moment.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you very much. Just for the record, what you had on the agenda does not reflect what you read in this letter, that it was very difficult to understand. The agenda stands on something that looks like part of a collaborative process with the SFO Roundtable, which has been something that citizens have been asking for in terms of collaboration, and definitely on night operations. I think that what Mark said is really important, that this involves a lot of other items from the SFO Roundtable. And so it's really important that when you have something on an agenda, you also put your backup documentation, for example, this letter, which involves these other procedures, and we don't know what they are.
Well, I'm just gonna, Jennifer, I'm just gonna comment that the agenda was put together more than a week ago, and the document from Mary Lynn I literally got this morning. So,
right. So then it should not be, dealt with unless all the documentation is lined up and the public has awareness of what it's all about. I'm just going to finally comment on the fact that this is how to allocate really FAA resources. They have a team assembled to look at night. It's a sort of team that we need in order to look at night operations that are affecting the Mid-Peninsula. So I think this is important to be a part of. And, you talked a lot about different lanes, whether you're going to open a lane here or not. We do want to be clear about what lanes are closed to this issue if you're not going to tackle it, or if it's going to be done at the main roundtable, because then we do have to find a way for FAA to address our issues, whether it's through the SFO roundtable or so forth, because definitely if it has not been clear to now that nighttime operations over Mid-Peninsula and several cities, even from South Mateo counties all the way to, all the way to Sunnyvale, I would think, or to Mountain View, that they are not an issue, but they're certainly an issue for Mid-Peninsula cities. They are probably the highest priority.
Thank you. Glenn, did you want to say something before I move on? Okay. The next item on our agenda.
Anita.
I'm sorry, Lydia.
Yeah, so just to go back to the agenda item before we were surprised by the letter that you read, because you just received it right today, and it was something that I guess the whole roundtable expecting a response to. But I just wanted to add that, you know, for the night hush, because I think in this item you did mention it. It'll be interesting to find out what are the Santa Clara, Santa Cruz Roundtable cities that are impacted from this, and then I guess there is a specific support letter asked now. And my understanding is the chair of the San Francisco Roundtable is going to provide an update. I don't know if FAA is going to be part of that update, but we should kind of check their calendar and their agenda for their upcoming meeting to see if they are planning to do that.
Yeah, and I know that our chair is in close contact with their vice chair on a daily basis, and maybe multiple times in the day as this has been developing, because they really wanted us to consider this, but that's why it was written the way it was in the agenda, that it's regarding night operations, and it was very general in the agenda, and we still don't have a huge amount of detail on what it would be. But the question is, do we want to be a player potentially or not? And that was a question that they wanted us to address. So I think we've addressed that. We have 10 minutes, and so I'd like to offer oral comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda or things you would like to see on our agenda. I'd like to try and limit that to a total of 5 minutes, I hope, so that we have 5 minutes to decide what else we want to take up before we adjourn. So is there anyone from the public who would like to comment on items not on the agenda or that they would like to see on a future agenda? And Darlene, go ahead.
Yes, the FAA has agreed to present every 2 months, and we have not been using those slots. So I think whatever outcome comes from this group on the work plan, et cetera, there are so many things we could have them present on. It's a little bit frustrating to hear, oh, we can only do a few, oh, we can only do a few, because we're confusing.
Got it. Got it.
Does it? Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer?
Landesman here.
Yes.
Just want to really stress the importance of the topic of alternative metrics, and that should be a fundamental first step to any of the committees. I didn't understand what you said about that what's discussed in the legislative committee can't be talked about in the technical committee. However this gets worked out, it needs to be clear to the public, because we cannot keep working on the basis of DNL alone. And you are just not representing noise at all on behalf of people on the ground if you keep talking on these other levels.
Right.
So alternative metrics should be the priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I don't see anyone else. Marie Jo.
I want to be very tactical here. I've attended the San Francisco Roundtable technical working group for at least 3 years. And I would recommend that this technical working group also gets the FAA to present to them as a dialogue, not as a broadcast from the FAA. Because it should be, in order to fix a problem, you have to be dialoguing. So if the FAA continues to come to the full roundtable where they just broadcast a PowerPoint presentation, we will not make any progress, and we're wasting everybody's time, including the taxpayers of this country. So please, my request is talk to the TWG at San Francisco, see how they did it, or you can look at videos and you'll see how much richer and how much more progress, because there's so much misunderstanding otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, back to the group. Lydia, Glenn, what do you want to see happen in our next meeting, and when and why?
Well, I would like to see assignments. You know, I know you're asking for next. You know, some of the less work, and that has big impact. For example, you know, like the pirate response. That's something that, you know, I would offer to take up and bring it back at the next meeting to present for the group's approval to recommend to the roundtable. Also, a Big Sur letter as well, the surfer letter. I might be able to put something together to bring back also. And also some of the things that I had volunteered for. I hate
That's
volunteering.
why you're on the committee, Lydia.
Also for the bodega one, I'll also do that one.
Okay.
Unless
Glenn?
Steve, I'll take that off Steve's shoulder.
Glenn?
So I think the question is that going on the assumption that you're going to present some kind of report to the full committee that says, here's a list, the 1 through N items that we think we could go ahead and work on in the technical working group, and that the full roundtable approves that, then what I'd want to do is I'd want our next working group agenda to be item 1 and item 2, and whatever it is that we're going to do to work on those 2 things. And I don't want anything else, so we have enough time, and that, the chair will figure it out. Whatever item number 1 is, here's what we're going to do to go ahead and start and get moving on that, whether, whatever that might be. Here's item number 2. Here's whatever it is that we've set up, as here's how we're starting those things. And I wouldn't want to see anything else on our agenda.
Okay. Mr. Alverson, would you like the last word?
I would like a word. Doesn't have to be the last. I guess a question regarding Lydia's offer, which is fantastic, but is that putting the cart before the horse? Because don't you need to get the roundtable's endorsement of what you want the committee to do before Lydia does the work and then presents it? Maybe Lydia, you're offering to do it after you get the roundtable's endorsement.
Or else she'll be like how we've done some things in some legislative world, which is we write the letter and we have the letter ready to go, and we go back to our big board and we say, we really think we ought to do this, and by the way, here's the letter. Which I suspect is how she's thinking. Now she's shaking her head. Go ahead, Lydia, the floor's yours.
I was going to say, Anita, you know me too well. Yeah, I didn't think as procedurally as Steve, and thank you, Steve, for bringing that back, but I was thinking of getting a letter kind of put together and maybe through the virtual channel of getting back to this, through emails for approval and so forth, to present, to get the approval for recommendation to the roundtable for their approval to send out.
Yeah, and some of this is
for Surfer.
Yeah, some of this is procedural stuff that as a roundtable, we haven't tried to scrub being down in the weeds on procedurally exactly how this works. I go back to what Glenn said at the very beginning about, procedurally, how does this work? And some of this we still don't exactly know. So as long as we don't, violate any laws, we'll work our way through it.
And of course, at the end of the day, the letter should be coming from the roundtable, Marilyn, the chair, and from Steve, our consultant.
Yeah. I think there would be an exceptional situation that might arise where we would be tasked on an exception basis to do something, including write a letter and send it. I know that has happened with in other organizations. So, that's a possibility, but right now we're not looking at that as an option.
Okay,
So,
then my clarification.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that you had gotten a letter from Mary Lynn.
I got an email. It's not a letter.
An email, and so that the public understands, it was providing background to you as to why this particular item was on the agenda.
Right, and it was really just trying to give us some background, because she doesn't know what's going in the letter. She doesn't know what San Francisco is really going to do, but they have tried very hard to get her to commit us to participating. And I know she told them, I can't commit them to participating. They have to talk about this. And so she was trying to give me enough to say, this is happening, and are you guys willing to sign up to play? Thank you, Steve. Okay, is there anything else? Technically, I don't have another spot for public comment, but I have one member of the I think maybe two members of the public who'd like to do something, and we've got 2 minutes. So Darlene, you got a minute, and then Jennifer, you got a minute. We're done.
I think this group should be able to bring forward to the full roundtable the recommendation to send the server letter. We've talked about it like at every meeting in the work plan. So I don't see why we have to draft a letter, propose a letter, send back the letter, and have them review the letter. I mean, Steve and Marilyn know how to send those letters. There's no genius content there, right, Steve?
Well, I see Steve nod his head.
Right. Okay, and then Jennifer, did you want to say anything further? I've got hands up from both Jennifers.
Yeah, I do, just briefly. Can you hear me?
Yes, quickly, please.
Yeah. I agree with Darlene. Otherwise, we're waiting till July, and then it's going to be months before that letter goes out. It seems like it would be very, very simple to compose that letter and simply send it out, or at least pass it by Mary Lynn and then send it out, because she sends out letters on a normal basis. And also, what was the action item out of this meeting? Was it just to kind of go back to the roundtable with a set of priorities? I'm a little bit confused as to the action items.
Yes, that's basically the main thing, was to go back to with a list of priorities, and also to go back with whether we were willing to participate with San Francisco Roundtable.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. And the other Jennifer, did you want to say something?
No, I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Anybody? Going once? Going twice. Thank you to all of our participants from the public, and also we have a representative from the elected officials here, and our admin person, and Steve and Evan, and we made it. We survived.
Thank you, Anita.
Thanks, Anita.
We'll see where we go from here. Thank you for all your help, and I want to also acknowledge the communications, the 2 communications we got from the public that are in the record and online. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Very much.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.